Hi there. So if you're familiar with the Headhunters period of Herbie Hancock in the 70s, you'll recognise those vibes that I've just played. The album Thrust in particular was a massive inspiration for me. It's really formulated a lot of how I play, particularly funk music. And I thought it'd be fun today to recreate those sounds. What you've just heard is a sampler pack that's available to buy at my website. The link is below. And it goes into Logic and Contact 5. I've sampled a Mini Moog, Pro 1, an analog polysynth, and my Vibernet, which is basically a clav. And I've tried to make them really perfectly tailored to those sounds. So you can buy them below, as I said, or you can just watch the video and try to emulate some of those sounds on plugins as well. I'm going to show you how I came to the sounds, and I'm going to show you how to approach playing some of them as well. Okay, so let's start off with the bass. In this case, I'm going to use my beloved Mini Moog, and you'll have this sample. If you buy the sample pack, you'll have this sound by the time we finish shaping it. I'm going to sample it note for note. If you're trying to emulate on a plugin, then just copy the settings. You can see everything here. There's only 2 oscillators working on this thing at the moment, but fortunately, that's enough. So I'm using 2 and 3, so disregard 1. And I always find the pulse waves are the best for bass. And I will always mix 2 different ones. So I've got this square one here. And then one of these thinned out pulses. And here you get a lot of low end from them. They're sort of gnarly at the top and thin. And then you get a lot of thick low end. So I think we'll stick with those 2. Now let's shape our filter. Turn the frequency cutoff down. And the contour will have about 7, let's say. Now let's shape the filter. Decay is how quickly the filter drops down, and sustain level is where it drops down to. If I have that up, it won't drop down so far. Let's add some resonance. You've got to be careful with resonance when you're making this kind of bass sound, because the more resonance you add, the thinner it's going to get, the less bass you're going to have. So I hear a lot of people making these sort of sounds, which is great. But you do just lose quite a bit of low end. So I'll just back that off a bit. Just have it at the edge of where you can start to hear that twang. That sounded pretty nice already. By the way, I've got this Mini Moog going through my URI 1176. And it's hitting it quite hard because it just gives you a nose to the note when you slam it a bit. I never change the settings on my URI. It's always the same. Doesn't matter what I'm using for. I'm going to show you those settings now. And this is how hard it's hitting it. And that really thickens up the sound. You know, it's bringing in some harmonics in there, you know, with the analog compression. And I don't like to have the oscillators really detuned much. Thing is, on a Mini Moog, if you make them as accurate as you can, they're going to end up out anyway because they just drift. Obviously, in a plug-in, it's not going to do quite the same thing, but I don't like it too broad and detuned. I think it sounds a bit cheesy sometimes. Yeah, I feel that's got just the right amount of nose on it now. Maybe just a tad less res. And when you're playing this thing, you know, it's about getting those little twirls in is great for a Moog style bass. Put those in and it just adds the funk. Then play some octave stuff. The old disco pony. Yeah, that's it. just a tweak more res. You just have to play around with it until just tweak it to your tastes, you know, and also the track that you're going to be playing with. In this case, there's no track yet, so we'll just go with this. And I'll add just a little bit of low end, around 60 hertz on this, just to compensate for that resonance, because that is scooping out the bass. But you can put it back with EQ. Just don't go too far with it, just a little bit, you know, a couple of dB is enough. All right, let's move on. So no slice of 70s funk would be complete without a generous helping of Wawa clav. In this case, it's my Vintage Vibe Vibernet, which is a modern recreation of the clav. Same workings inside. Basically inside here, it's almost like a guitar. It's got strings like a guitar and it gets plucked. And that, combined with the very light plastic keys, just makes the clav a perfect instrument for funk. You know, it just sounds funky when you play it. And the Vibernet is going into a wah-wah pedal called a Waco by Jam Pedals. It's a fantastic wah-wah pedal. Nile Rodgers uses it apparently, so if it's good enough for him, it's good enough for me. And from there, it's going into my Roland Space Echo, just for a sprinkling of spring reverb. I love the spring reverb on the Space Echo because it's just really cheap and crappy sounding, and it just has loads of character and stinks of the 70s. And from the reverb, it's again going into the 1176, being hit fairly hard. You need a compressor when you're using a wah-wah pedal because the dynamic range is huge. You know, as you open and close the pedal, you get a lot of spiky transients coming out. So compressing it is a really good idea because it really helps it sit much better in the mix. I like to have the reverb before the compressor as well. Engineers will tell you that's the wrong way around. You should have compression, then reverb. But I really like the effect of having the reverb and the dry signal then compressed. It kind of glues the sounds together for me and gives it more character and vibe. So if you're using a plug-in clav, I guess, you know, you can use a spring reverb plug-in. A good one is Outerverb, I quite like. Sounds quite similar to the Space Echo one, but I suppose there's loads of spring reverb plugins. Just a little smidge of it. Then maybe a little bit of compression afterwards. Try that. The way I'm going to sample this is I'm going to do 3 notes per sample, just hit really short with the wah closed, half open, and then fully open. And then hopefully when I program velocity switching, you'll get the feeling of the clav by hitting harder or softer on the keyboard. So let's see how that goes. Okay, so next up in the mix is some sort of string machine sound. Back in the 70s, it would have been most likely the Selena string machine. It's the classic sound for that kind of 70s funk and jazz funk stuff. I'm going to be using this E7 by GS Music. It's an Argentinian company, and it's a wicked analog polysynth, which I've done a video on already. And it's really good at making string sounds, so I'm going to use this. It's analog, and it's going through a valve compressor just to warm it up a little bit more. First up, we've got one oscillator with a sawtooth. And on this one, you can add a pulse as well, which you can on many synths. You can have the two together. And the reason for doing that is I want to modulate the pulse width. And that sounds like that. Straight away, you're getting that chorusy kind of effect with one oscillator. And then let's add oscillator 2. It's just on a sawtooth again. We can add a pulse to that one as well. And the trick to getting a string sound, I think, is to have the resonance open and not involve the envelope generator, really. I'm not saying this is the only way to make a string sound, but this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to crank the resonance right up. And what that does is it thins out the sound and gives you more of that stringy texture. You can hear that. And let's add some release. And let's slow down the attack. Straight away, you're more or less there. I'm just going to add some pitch modulation to oscillator 2 so that it kind of moves against the first one. Now with a Selena, it had a few buttons. It had like violin, viola, and then a cello button. So if you put the cello in, you get an octave below. It sounds quite cool. So I'm going to use one of these sub oscillators here to bring in a lower octave. Might as well use both of them, then I've got more detune. Yeah, I'm happy with that. I think what I'll do is I'll sample it without the delayed attack so that you've got the option of having it with a full attack as well. So to top off this pack, I've got my old Pro one here, and I've got it going through this. It's another jam pedal actually called a Delay Llama Extreme. You can add a bit of sort of tape type warble to the delay. It's very cool. It's a very simple patch, so I won't really spend much time on it. It's just got like the cutoff right down, resonance up, and a very short decay on the filter, so you get this kind of sound. You know, it's just instant 70s funk. If you had the attack a bit slower on the filter, it sounds cool as well. I think I'll sample both versions for you actually, because it's quite funky like that too. Okay, so here's how the samples came out. The clav came out really great. You get a great sound when you bounce between the left and right hands, and it helps keep you in time as well. Like that. And that 70s kind of Headhunters type stuff, they used to use a lot of ninth chords. So I've got playing like a D9 there. And I'm just going up a tone and back. Simple as that. And then rocking between the left and right hand. Like that. And you can play single line parts with it as well. See there, I'm just playing like a dominant scale. Syncopation is really important with that jazz funk stuff, especially. Get those in-between notes going, those 16th notes. You know, it's just a feel thing. Play along with a drum machine and just try not always being on the beat, getting in between the beats, getting the 16th notes and catching them. That's really that 70s kind of Headhunters type sound. So that's the clav. The bass sounds like this. Come out real nice. And the res is like this. Wicked, love it. String machine is this. Let's chuck a phaser on that, hang on. This is just a Logic phaser with its default patch. And often they'd have those string notes just really clustered and just going through the sort of changes, building tension. Imagine you're in the 70s, everyone's wearing flares, it's all a bit mysterious. Anyway. Next.